Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this virtual press conference from the premises of the European Medicines Agency in London. Today, we will present to you the first clinical reports published under our innovative policy on the publication of clinical data for medicines for human use. You've already received a few documents from us on this topic earlier today, including a press release and quotations from various stakeholders. Just a reminder, these documents are under embargo until 3 p.m. UK time today, so a little bit less than 1 hour from now. My name is Maria Agnes Hein, and I'm the head of EMA's communication department. And I'm delighted to have with me Guido Rasi to my left, EMA's executive director. He will talk about how we got to where we are today and how the proactive publication of clinical reports is expected to benefit innovation, scientific research, patients, and civil society as a whole. Then further to my left is Noël Vathion. He's EMA's Deputy Executive Director, who will talk you through the details of the policy, and he will give you a sneak preview of some of the clinical reports published under the policy ahead of the official go-live of our website at 3 p.m. today. And finally, we have with us Jan Le Cam. He is the COO of EURORDIS, the European Organization for Rare Diseases. He will share his views on how providing open access to clinical data will benefit patients specifically. We will then open the floor to questions and plan to wrap up latest by 3 p.m. UK time, which is also the time when the embargo will be lifted on the information provided. If you wish to tweet following the press briefing and tell us what you think about the policy, we would like to encourage you to use our hashtag OpenCTData. I will now hand over to Guido Rasi. Guido, please.
Thank you, Maria-Agnes. Good morning, everybody. I'm very pleased today to present our new website, which will provide open access to clinical data for new medicines authorized in the European Union. But what are these data? These are the clinical reports, the reports on clinical studies, the clinical trial carried out to prove the efficacy and the safety of a medicine. Are those data that companies submit to EMA to support their market authorization application. And it's on the basis of this data that our scientific experts make recommendation whether a medicine should or should not be authorized for the use in Europe. So today we are opening up our data, which means that thousands of pages of clinical data will ultimately be available to public scrutiny. And this, I think, is a major achievement. I'm personally very proud because this is, I think, is a significant step forward to an increased transparency. But also, it turns EMA to be the first medicines authority worldwide to allow researchers, patients, healthcare professionals, and anybody else who is interested in looking or even in downloading our data. I think this public scrutiny will help to build and maintain trust in our work, and this trust, I think, is essential if we wanted medicine to be used comfortable and to be prescribed comfortable and safely and in the most effective manner. So I also strongly believe that this initiative will help to advance the global debate around the transparency. The access to this data set will also facilitate independent reanalysis, and this will increase scientific knowledge and potentially will also further inform our decision-making in the future. Innovation will also benefit from an increased transparency. We know that sometimes some companies are reluctant to have their data out in the open. They might have, for example, some concern of what use their competitors can make of them. But I think they should not be afraid of transparency. The shared knowledge about the medicine and underlying clinical studies helps help developers to learn from each other's experience, can lead to more efficient medicine development, since it will help to reduce duplication and also helps to generate new ideas. And indeed, regulators will benefit. I think we have quite a robust and strong system to evaluate and monitor medicine. But still, I think we can surely still improve, and I think this is the right tool to make us working even better. Maybe some of you can remember that we launched this initiative 4 years ago, 2012. At that time, we clearly stated that we were committed to proactively publish clinical data for centrally authorized products. I remember that I said the issue was not if we would do it, but how. So the benefit for us was clear, but however, the question of how we would proactively publish the data was a little more complex and a little more than we expected. And so EMA had to develop an ad hoc policy, consult with stakeholders, and take into account their view, and those views are sometimes conflicting. We had many issues to consider, and when we started, the focus was prevalently on commercially confidential information and how to deal with them. Surprisingly, this was quickly solved. Now it's very well recognized also by industry that those data are mostly not commercially confidential. What it turned out that the protection of personal data has been a major challenge, a bigger challenge than the commercial confidential one, confidential information one, because we had to make sure that the data are workable, are reusable by those who want to reanalyze, but at the same time, we have to be sure that we protect the identity and the personal information of those patients who participate the trials. So our initiative is unprecedented, and so we have to find our own approach to solve this problem. I think we shaped this innovative transparency policy in a very inclusive way, in a very inclusive process. We took all the interested stakeholders along the way, meaning patient, healthcare professionals, academia, pharmaceutical industry, health technology assessment bodies, and national medicines regulators. And also we had to include the comment of European institutions such as the European Parliament, European Ombudsman, European Data Protection Supervisor, and of course in agreement and collaboration with the European Commission. So I definitely want to thank all the people, all the organizations who have contributed to the reflection that consent today to release this truly innovative transparency tool. And of course, we need to continue to keep going in a good collaborative mode and to adapt the procedure as needed, because this is a learning exercise. In 2012, we embarked in a journey. Today, we enjoy a major achievement, a major milestone, but the journey continues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Guido. And I hand over to Noël Vathion for more details on the publication itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie-Agnès, and good afternoon. I will provide you more details about how we implemented this particular policy, and also will give you more details on what you will see when you access this particular website, which is launched today. Perhaps to put things a little bit even more into context that Guido has already done, is that up to now, if you wanted to have information on the clinical data, on clinical reports, etc., this was only possible under the so-called access to documents legislation. So anyone who wanted to have access to the data had to submit a request for access to documents, and then access was granted. Now we go one step further because we will be proactively publishing these data on a public website. So what is made available? Clinical reports for applications, for marketing authorization, for medicines, for human use. And under clinical reports, we mean clinical summaries, clinical overviews, clinical study reports, and a number of appendices. For applications which have been submitted as of the 1st of January 2015, for any initial applications for marketing authorization, as of the 1st of July 2015, for any variations to marketing authorization in terms of line extensions and extension of indications. When will those data be made available? They will be made available once the European Commission has issued its decision. That can be a positive or a negative decision. And as you may know, these decisions are based on the outcome of the scientific review by the EMA, which leads to an EMA recommendation. Not only will we provide access to those data, but also to any applications which have been withdrawn by pharmaceutical companies before the EMA has issued a recommendation. Now, as was already mentioned by Guido, this has been a journey, and not always an easy journey. It has been a very complex journey, not only in order to develop this particular policy with often competing interests by all the various stakeholders, but also by implementing this particular policy. As was already mentioned, we are the first regulatory authority in the world to provide access to this extent. And we had to find a balance. We had to find a balance between, on one side, allowing access to the data on a public website, and at the other side, we had, at the other end, we had to discourage unfair commercial use of the data. In order to do so, we introduced a publication process, and that publication process is based on two pillars. The first one is the availability of a user-friendly tool, which will provide you access to the website. And secondly, there will be so-called terms of use, which govern the access to and the use of the data. To access the website, you will have to register, and it's a simple registration process. And as a next step, depending on your need, clinical reports will be available on screen for any user. We call that for general information purposes, or clinical data. Clinical reports will be downloadable, can be saved, can be printed, and this is what we call for academic and non-commercial research purposes. Today, we will publish the clinical reports for the first two products. The first one is Kyprolis, which is an orphan medicine for the treatment of multiple myeloma. And the second one is Zurampic, which is for a medicine for gout. As a result of that publication, we will today release more than 100 clinical reports and more than 260,000 pages related to those two products. We will now give you a demonstration of how to access the website and what you will see. So if you can start the demonstration. So let's say that you have registered already and that you have registered as an academic person. So now we will log in as an academic person. There are various ways in order to access a particular product. You will see a tab on your right-hand side, how to find these clinical data. So we will go now to the two products that are currently where the data will be released. So we'll go to Kyprolis. And you will see here a lot of information in terms of the data, the clinical overviews, the clinical summaries, and the clinical study reports. So let's go to the clinical study reports. you will see the whole list of clinical study reports that have been published. And you will go to one particular example. In order to access that, you will have to accept the terms of use. And the terms of use, if you want to have more information on those, these are on the cover page of that particular website. So you have to click that you accept the terms of use. And then you will see the clinical study report. So a couple of comments here. What you will see is a watermark, and the watermark is also to discourage unfair commercial use. So perhaps to be more specific, what we do not want is that this information is printed, is being put in an application file, and is submitted by a third party in order to obtain a marketing authorization in a third country. So that is what we mean by unfair commercial use. What you will also see in these clinical study reports are so-called redactions. So if you can go to a page where we have redactions, yes, let's stop there. So redactions can be either because of the fact that we have to protect commercial confidential information, or because we have to protect personal data. When we have to protect commercial confidential information, the redactions will be marked or masked in black. When we are talking about protection of personal data, they will be in blue, and you will each time see also the acronym PPD, protection of personal data. Now, perhaps to put things again in perspective, we have already, throughout the whole process, said, not only in relation to the development of this policy, but also in terms of access to documents, that for the EMA, the amount of commercial confidential information in clinical reports is extremely limited. And to give you an indication of how extremely limited this is, out of the 260,000 pages which we will release today, only 2 pages contain commercial confidential information that has been redacted. So if you go for the example of Kyprolis in this report, but for the totality of the information for Kyprolis, there is no redaction because of commercial confidential information. Now, the redaction of personal data, this has indeed, as Guido already mentioned, this is much more complex, because if you look at how to redact, there is no golden standard. So the EMA was obliged in order to develop its own standard, taking into account all the available information which is outside, taking into account, once again, competing views from different stakeholders. And when we look for the balance of how to protect personal data, we have, of course, taken into account that such data should not be disclosed. At the other side, we would like, of course, to have as much transparency as possible, because the ultimate aim is that we improve as much as possible the data utility. So in order to do that, we have developed guidance on how to anonymize, because we should not forget that pharmaceutical companies and the EMA, because the data are being submitted for the purpose of publication on a public website, we have to ensure that these data are rendered anonymous. And that's why we had to give an interpretation to this. And if you're interested in the guidance documents, they are available on our website. Now, how did the company come to this particular redaction? Here we can show you another feature of the data that we are publishing. So we will close the clinical study report for Kyprolis. We will go to Zurampic, and you will have in the data that are available also a so-called anonymization report. The anonymization report is a document you will have again to accept the terms of use. The anonymization report is a document which describes the company's approach to the redaction of the personal data. So if we go here to page 5, in page 5, you will see how the data, if data have been redacted, taken into account direct identifiers, etc. So you will see that the company approach here has been a simple redaction, which is a way of anonymizing the data. When you go to the next page, you will see there is a particular section which talks about sex, ethnic origin, etc. And the company has chosen here not to apply a redaction of the personal data. If you would do the comparing exercise with Kyprolis, you will see the opposite. But you should not forget, Kyprolis, we're talking here about an orphan medicine. There are a lot of small size clinical data with only, let's say, sometimes very few patients. So there the company is taking a much more conservative approach. So this is the end of that particular demonstration. I can talk to you now about the next steps that we are going to take. And for the next steps, I mean, today is, as was already mentioned, the start of a journey. It is a very important milestone. We will now gradually publish all clinical reports for authorized products and withdrawn applications as of September 2015. And when we will be on cruising speed, we will publish within 30 days following the European Commission decision or within 150 days following the withdrawal of a particular file by a pharmaceutical company. We expect to publish 4,500 clinical reports per year. We will, of course, closely monitor the implementation. We will see what lessons do we learn. We may have to also amend our guidance documents, and we recognize that there is still quite a lot of work to be done in the field of anonymization. Therefore, we have taken the initiative in order to establish a multidisciplinary technical advisory group on anonymization. This also takes into account feedback that we receive from the European Data Protection Supervisor that this is a very developing field, and we would like to have the best possible expertise helping the EMA in order to move forward on a more, let's say, on how we can further sophisticate the redaction of personal data. Therefore, to establish that particular group, we will launch a public call for expression of interest to find the best possible experts. In conclusion, this has been a long journey. That journey continues. It is a milestone today, a very important milestone for the agency, but we are on a learning curve. We are learning every day that we are progressing these reports provided by companies. Companies are learning. So the website as such is not perfect. We will make improvements. We also count on you to use the website and to give feedback to us so that we can further improve for the benefit of all citizens. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Noel. I now hand over to Jan Lekam. Jan, please.
Thank you. Thank you. In fact, patient advocates and NeuroDis in particular, we've been asking for full access to information about clinical trials ongoing or stopped, as well as to the results of clinical trials, and we've been deprived for decades of that. So we're very happy to see the progress, first on clinical trials and now on clinical data. In fact, patients, doctors, researchers, the same, or society at large have the right to know the ongoing clinical research, the positive or negative results, published or not published. And this is what makes a difference today. By making the clinical data from results of clinical trials fully available is essential to patients, and we do welcome this pioneering policy from the European Medicine Agency, and we hope it will have an impact beyond Europe. Why do we like it? What kind of benefits we see is first a knowledge base. Making this information available increase the knowledge base on the diseases. I should say even more when it is rare diseases like for us. We want to make the most of any data. It's also very important when it's a new class of product or a first treatment for a disease that has no treatment yet. It avoids duplication, or at least we can hope that it will reduce duplication of research. And it's ethical for patients not to repeat unnecessary trials and studies. So there is an ethical aspect into it which is key to us, and we hope that this will help to make better use of available resources. We can also hope that it will channel the investment then on new research questions rather than just repeating or following the previous path, and to enable some of this independent research to reanalyze some of the data. Even though we want to see here how it goes, there is also a learning curve here to make sure that how the academic research will not favor controversies, but will really generate new knowledge. So the handling of controversies will be a key element we will be vigilant on. The second consideration I will make is about the long period of consultation. It has started 2012, you mentioned it. There was a workshop in November 2012. We participated into it, and after that, there were 2 rounds of consultations involving a lot all the patient organization and consumer groups involved in EMA activities. And in 2014, EURDIS officially supported the policy of EMA because we really wanted to encourage it. But we also wanted to give the message that to implement that policy well, it needs to have the proper resources. And I hope that will be the case, because if not, we're taking resources from one type of activity to another. And that's a concern that as patients we have in order to see consistency over time. With that, I'd like to praise the work of my colleague, François Houillet, who has been really leading that work in charge of access and information on medicines in EURDIS, but also the volunteers. 14 volunteers have been working on that over 4 years in EURDIS, and all the members of the Patient and Consumer Working Party at the European Medicine Agency. We had an interesting moment 2 years ago. It was the public hearing of the Ombudsman at the European Parliament. And I remember there was a lot of misunderstanding on what we wanted to achieve. All the commercial confidential information was making a big thing, which at the end it wasn't. And also there were members of parliament expressing themselves on behalf of patients, although they didn't consult the patients. So I hope that they will see from the reality of that policy that there is really much more goods than there is risks. This policy, we believe, will enhance the trust, not only in the regulatory body and its assessments, but also in clinical trials. We hope that over time, it will take years, obviously, but there will be a larger trust from society and from patients to engage into clinical trials and be recruited because they know that they will have access to the results, and that makes a huge difference. And the last consideration I will have is to say that the release of clinical data in 2 steps is very much welcome for us, that the clinical reports first and the patient individual data later on. We recognize there is a learning curve, so we'll have to see what are the side effects, let's say, of that policy. But we think that the policy as presented strikes the right balance between the availability of data to generate new knowledge and to make the most of the limited scientific and medical data from patients. So strike the right balance between that and the protection of personal data. And we believe that the way it has been developed and the consultation have been ongoing is really satisfactory for that purpose. That was our main concern all along. So we must be clear to the patients, I'm more talking to the patients now, is that your data will not be made available to the public. What is being made public are the report of clinical studies with anonymized information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jan. Now we are taking questions from the floor. To ask a question, please click on the raise hand icon in the Adobe Connect menu bar. And when you are called to speak, please introduce yourself and give your name and affiliation. So the first question is from, let's have a look.
Yes, sorry, this is Alison Abbott from Nature magazine. Thanks very much. I have a question about the judicial decisions that you announced a couple of weeks ago, where the President of the General Court actually blocked the release of documents relating to 2 studies, one for Translarna, which is actually for Duchenne muscular dystrophy, a rare disease, and the other for a veterinary product. I wondered if you could comment on those cases, mentioning whether these are the only ones that are likely to come to court, and how it could actually come to court when the rules have been so clear and so widely agreed.
Thank you. Noel, probably you want to respond?
So you probably are referring to the 2 products where the EMA has appealed. And in this particular respect, it is important to say well, you say when there are clear rules, I mean, at the end of the day, anybody is free in order to decide if they would like to question this or not. The only point that I want to say is that what we have upheld is that there can be no general presumption of confidentiality. So there can be no blank protection as such. That is also an approach that we have defended successfully in previous cases. And as a result of that, the agency has always looked on a case-by-case basis on the redactions that are being proposed in terms of commercial confidential information. The approach of the EMA is not different in terms of access to documents versus this proactive publication of clinical data. And we are confident that that approach is the correct one.
Okay, then we take the next journalist who wants to ask a question. It's Vibha Sharma from the Pink Sheet.
Yeah, hi, this is Vibha from the Pink Sheet. I have a question about what are the resource implications of this initiative and how much staff is involved. Is it part of their existing jobs or do you have a separate department for this? And can you put a cost to this initiative and can you sustain it in the long run?
Thank you. Who wants to take the question? Noel, please.
Yes, I mean, as we have said, we are doing this within the current resources. So as a result of that, we needed to have a look also at the staff that has been involved in other activities of the EMA, often core activities of the EMA. And we had to rearrange internally the staff that are dealing with this proactive publication of clinical data are also dealing with access to documents requests, because we do not want, of course, we should not forget that we are dealing here with the same type of redactions, although the process is, of course, different. It is very resource intensive. It's a commitment from our side in order to further increase transparency, but one has to understand that because of the sheer amount of data that have to be published, we will do our utmost in order to stick to all the timetables that we have promised, and we will see, as we are still on the learning curve, how will that progress over the next weeks and months to come. It is perhaps important to emphasize that we are in the process currently with several other companies in order to submit data over the next couple of weeks.
Thank you very much. I don't see another question at this moment. Well, if there's no additional need for additional information, we thank you all very much for your participation and interest in this press briefing. So thank you very much, and all the best for you today. Bye-bye.
Thank you.